any members of the public here for public comment, so we will move ahead with our agenda, and our first action item is to review the October meeting minutes.
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Our next agenda item is our November 16th, 2016, our rescheduled budget millage public hearing. Brad, you want to touch on that?
I put this on the agenda just to remind all of us that we will be having a budget hearing next Wednesday at 5:30. Isn't that right, Rachel? It's at 5:30?
Yes.
5:30 here at PSTA. Basically a redo of just the last public hearing that we had on the budget. It should be a very fast meeting, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are we getting, I take it Rachel's getting a good response to our board members who can be there?
Yeah, I
So
think there
we're going to
was
have quorum.
10 or 11.
10 or 11.
Okay.
Is it okay? And there were still some I didn't waiting to hear from them, so. But we'll find out for sure when she sends out the quorum in a few days. So.
Yeah.
And so I take it that the new advertisement has, corrected advertisement has
It has.
been published, and we're
Saturday.
We
on Saturday?
Yeah, Saturday.
Okay.
we went with the new process where we have the state go ahead and approve our ad before we submit it, and they did, and it was published
Okay.
on Saturday.
All right, great. So moving on, our next item on the agenda is to review the agenda for our December board meeting. Our December board meeting is December 7th at 9 a.m.
That's right.
Does everybody have it on their?
iPad, or I've got one extra copy here, a paper copy.
I think we're okay.
Okay. So we've got a fairly busy agenda for December 7th, at least it's lining up that way. On the consent agenda, we'll have some items that are going to come before the Finance Committee. Our software agreement, our annual agreement with for our real-time, and then I think we're going to add a late-breaking item that I heard about last night. A contract amendment to our Direct Connect agreements. The board approved last month expanding Direct Connect program to a second pilot level, and we need what I think is a minor contract amendment to have 8 stops, 8 connecting spots rather than the 7 that you approved last month. So that'll go to the Finance Committee.
Which would, is there a specific stop you have in mind to add?
We're going to add a location. It really was just erroneous in the contract because we had planned to add it before the board meeting. And unfortunately, I didn't get into the contract, but it's going to be in Largo.
Okay.
But when we show the map, the 7 locations that we originally had a pretty large gap in mid-Pinellas County with no real locations, and so this will be at Largo in Missouri, right by Joe's office.
Get off and buy stuff,
Exactly. But really, it's a way. We think that is a key stop, a key connecting spot where people might who have jobs on Bryan Dairy, or we have the Route 58, but it's very limited service. They can take an Uber for low cost to that Largo location and catch the 52. That's sort of the target audience, is the Bryan Dairy employment zone for that connecting spot. So that's why we think it's a good ad.
Madam Chairman?
Yes.
We still have the route that runs along Bryan Dairy.
We do.
But it doesn't have...
It's very limited in span of hours and frequency. And the 52 along East Bay is much more frequent. Either there or down to Ulmerton Road and 59.
Bryan Dairy is south of Ulmerton.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, not the 52, but that would be the connecting spot that they could still get an Uber ride to.
Okay.
You'll see this at the Finance Committee.
Okay.
Then the first action item is the recommendations from the nominating committee, which, about board officers and the committee appointments. So just a reminder that the nominating committee recommended Chair Rice continue on for a second year. Commissioner Long moving from Secretary Treasurer to Vice Chair, and Commissioner Barkley moving into the Secretary Treasurer position. Adding Pat Gerard to the Executive Committee, and then Bill Johnson would remain as the past chair. So that would be the Executive Committee for next year, based on the nominating committee's recommendations. In addition, the nominating committee recommended that Mr. Johnson take on the role of being the PSTA appointment to the MPO, Ford Pinellas, and approved everyone who had put in a request to be on a certain committee or to stay on the committee that they're on. That's what the committee approved that. They gave me a couple tasks to talk to different board members about, like Mayor Beavis, seeing if he would be willing to serve on the Personnel Committee. He will. He is interested in that, or he's willing. Interested is maybe too strong of a word. He's okay doing that. And I think that's it. I think the next step, we talked a little bit about how St. Petersburg will have to identify a replacement for Ben Diamond as a citizen appointee for St. Pete.
Yes.
Madam Chair, then Dunedin will be.
And Dunedin as well.
Somebody, a new person to replace Julie,
Yeah.
That's right.
who's termed
Termed
out
out.
because of PSTA rules.
Right.
So
Yep.
two new representatives, maybe as early as June.
Yeah. And I guess technically we could have a new county person. Charlie Justice was only actually approved for 2016.
Tick-tock,
His
tick-tock.
schedule will accommodate continuing on, but I think he was the only one that was available to work in that position.
Yeah, I think that's still the plan. So that will be the first action item.
Well, before we move on, I just want to say real quickly that I did watch most of the nomination committee meeting. There were a little bit of some audio issues I couldn't quite hear towards the end, but thank you for them nominating me, and I think a lot of the decisions that were made were all very good ones, and welcome aboard, Joe. And I'm really thrilled to hear that Commissioner Johnson will be the PSTA representative to MPO. I feel like PSTA will be very well represented in Commissioner Johnson's hands on that regional board. And these boards take people of all backgrounds and leadership styles, and I think you're going to be a great addition to the MPO.
Thank you very much. I've been certainly involved in the periphery of it. I actually asked to be appointed to the PSTA, by PSTA to the MPO back before Chris Arbitine
Oh, okay.
got
That was a couple of weeks ago.
I think it was like 02.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Okay.
thank you for your
Something
time.
somewhat related to that, but I'm not really sure what has happened, but you know that the MPOs, the Pasco, Hillsborough, and Pinellas MPOs meet bi-monthly or something like that as the TMA, the Tampa Bay TMA. And I'm not exactly certain how, but they have added to their representation, which is somewhat loose, a PSTA, Hart, and T. Barta to the representatives from the 3 different MPOs. And the chairs of those organizations, I thought were invited. But the invite that I've seen now, Chair Rice, you have not been invited. So we got to get you invited and see if you might be willing to come to those meetings
Yeah.
to represent PSTA.
My recollection is that during my chair, when I was chair here, I started going to those meetings. And when they were talking about transit issues, they invited first Brad and Kathleen Egan to sit at the table.
Yeah.
And then, since I was there, they invited me to sit at the table and ended up saying, well, we should include these other organizations, including TBARTA. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether the bylaws say that, but they have consistently invited, and at the last meeting, I would start out sitting in the back of the room, and they said, well, come on, sit up at the table. So, but, I mean, you should have been invited.
Yeah, well, we'll have the opportunity to ask this afternoon at the MPO meeting. It's Pinellas Forward meeting. What's going on? But thank you, I wasn't aware of that.
And that is the group that is discussing the how the MPOs work together, perhaps consolidating or doing a common plan. There was a lot of discussion about that.
Yeah.
I won't maybe go through the rest of the agenda, but the item 6B, Clearwater Intermodal Facility Task Work Order, is a contract or a task order that could be $500,000 to do the design of the potentially new transfer center in downtown Clearwater to replace the Park Street terminal. Thanks to a very old grant the PSTA still has sitting around that will fund it, a federal grant. We can use this funds to design the facility, coordinating with the city of Clearwater so that it is a shovel-ready project.
Do we have a location?
We have a location, the former St. Pete Times location right there on Route 60, Gulf to Bay, has been torn down, or the building has been torn down, and it's owned by the city of Clearwater.
Okay.
And it's a
It's on the
a block
south-
that goes to the north.
It's on the southbound side, I think,
It
right?
is,
Of the access road.
it is on the north side of Court Street.
Right.
Northwest corner of Court and Murphy.
Right, yeah. Okay.
Right next to the Pinellas Trail.
Mhm.
Or, not the Pinellas Trail, the tracks.
Well, and the trail runs through there, runs through east. There are two buildings on the west side of that block, but otherwise we own the whole block, and then we own the block to the north of that
Okay,
as well.
cool. All right. So plenty of room.
Plenty of room for a traditional plus. It was, originally we were hoping it would be the rail station.
Right.
as well.
Yeah. The city has from time to time talked about either supplementing the transit facility with parking, like parking facility, or a city hall, or other purposes. So the design will, I think, explore those different things as well.
Can-
And one of, if I may, one of the elements of the work order for our design consultants for the Cochran Park Bluff area was amended to add a potential downtown landing site for an elevated
CBT.
route to the beach,
Oh, okay.
just to see where that might be. Assumedly, that would be at this site, but it might be someplace else, which would change your study to wherever that's, might look at other options.
Getting back to the rail idea, does the plan have potential to accommodate that? Should we eventually get that?
Yeah, I mean, potentially. I mean, the premium transit study that is kicking off, Hart has hired a consultant who is going to conduct that. Is certainly going to look at the CSX rail possibilities that go. That's that rail connecting over the top of the bay to Hillsborough. Item 6C is going to be come through our legislative committee, which meets next week, and based on meeting with state representatives and Hart, it looks like it will encompass our priorities, at least at the state level, will continue to be a express bus service to Tampa International Airport from Clearwater Beach, a increase in transportation disadvantaged funds at the state level to support our TD program, and number 3 is a exclusive busway design of an exclusive busway connection across the Clearwater Beach Causeway Bridge. Those would be our 3 state legislative priorities. There has been some discussions. I know Cassandra's participated in a discussion earlier this week. At the Hart meeting, we discussed sort of, I think, an additional project, but very complementary to our Clearwater Beach to the airport express to be another express route to the airport from St. Petersburg that would either one or both of those would have complimentary service from the airport to downtown Tampa on the Hillsborough side. So we'll probably have to discuss and work through how we present both the St. Petersburg and the Clearwater destinations in our priorities, or in coordination with Hart. But I think it's more of a phasing thing with that. On the federal side,
They called that the airport, right?
they have come up with the branding of it, an airporter, yeah.
To St. Pete. It's going St. Pete and then also to Tampa.
Yeah, I guess so. I'm not sure how the airporter name and concept came up with, but whether it's the airporter that also goes to Clearwater Beach, and what he asked me, so I don't know.
Maybe I'm way premature, but the stop at the airport, would that be at the, sort of at the end of the spur? Or is it gonna go right up to the airport and drop people off?
Well, the concept is that they're building a whole new, it's under construction at the airport right now to build a whole, basically transportation center down by the economy parking.
Right.
That will be connected to the people mover rail
That's what I'm.
system.
Okay, so that end of that spur right there is where this would go.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. On the federal side, our priorities are going to include continued supporting of the federal funds to support our bus rapid transit project, Central Avenue BRT. And in addition, Van Scoyoc has suggested that we continue to support Congress approving funds for Tiger, Lono bus funds, bus and bus facility funds, so we'll do that. And then as sort of our new item, more of a policy item, is to support counting of Uber and Lyft connecting trips using Uber and Lyft or taxi cabs like we are doing, counting those as transit rides in the formulas that the feds use to allocate funding. Right now, the feds have not recognized first mile, last mile kind of things like our project. They don't count those rides. They're not eligible. Although I know a lot of folks are working to make that happen. The last thing on the action list is an item that came up at the HART PSTA meeting. And if Commissioner Long was here, I was going to ask her if she would be willing, at the request of several folks, that she would give her presentation of her idea for a council of governments to the PSTA board. She gave that presentation. She's given that presentation a number of times to the County Commission, to the Florida League, Suncoast League of Cities, at the HART meeting, and I've got the opportunity to see it a fourth time at the St. Pete Chamber, and maybe she's given it 10 more times, I don't know. But she, at the HART meeting, she finished her presentation with what she called a call to action, which was for PSTA and HART to develop a written agreement, a contract or an MOU type thing that would memorialize in writing all of the areas that we have been and commit to continue to work together on. Such things as procurement, technology, maintenance, our fare system, etc., would all be in this document. And I think this would be a good thing to develop because it's tangible evidence that I think we can take to Tallahassee as part of our legislative advocacy to show the state representatives and senators how well we are working together and how much activity is already going on. So that's why this would be an action item. Commissioner Long would give her presentation and her conceptual idea of a council of governments, which has received fairly positive reviews, I would say, and then approve developing this MOU that would come back to the board in January. The HART board met yesterday, or Monday, and approved developing this MOU. So this would be complementary to that.
Commissioner Johnson.
Thinking back to her presentation and also thinking back to my involvement with TBARTA has an enumerated, great big long list of enumerated powers for TBARTA, which does not include taxation or revenue, but it has this great long list. What I was trying to reconcile or recall from the presentation that Janet Long made is to what would be the enumerated powers or responsibilities of the Council of Governments. Would it just be a convener like the Regional Planning Council, or would it have some actual powers? And I don't remember from her presentation. That would be a question that I would ask her the next time I see that presentation. So, yeah.
Today, at least, at the MPO meeting, you will, I think it might be even an action item. On the MPO agendas today is the scope of work for a study that TBARTA, I guess, has drafted with assistance from WIT and Beth from the MPOs. A study of the, I guess, proper governance model that would best meet the needs of the Tampa Bay region. And I know that TBARTA is hoping that the state will provide the funding for this. So they are advocating for the DOT to provide the funding for this study. So I think in the I saw in the MPO packet that the scope that they've developed, that the TMA, I think, Bill, didn't they approve it or they recommended it? Yeah, to move forward. So that is a proposed study that 6 months to a year would develop some recommendations on a governance model. And that seems to be kind of moving forward. I don't know if Commissioner Long's proposal really accommodates that specifically, but it does sort of tie in with what she's proposing. Any other questions, or that certainly might be an interesting topic.
I was going to say, except for the fact that Commissioner Long is fed up with studies.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know if she really.
It turns out we might really need this one to inform what her proposal is. So.
Yeah. The last item on the informational item on the agenda, which last item I think will take some time, is sort of a higher level look at where public transit is headed in the face of these emerging technologies.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, Cassandra was a member of the most recent leadership APTA class of the 25 greatest people in the public transit industry that are up and coming. And they got the opportunity to give a presentation, develop a whole study and do a presentation. So, and Cassandra's was related to how a transit agency of the future needs to be nimble and utilize these technologies, keep their head out of the sand and be aware of them, and take advantage of them. And so she'll give her presentation of that, and then I will do a less great job of then following that up with what we're working on here at PSTA that I think tries to meet the goals of what her group and she came up with, as far as showing how PSTA is an agency that is embracing this concept of looking to the future. So I think that I'm excited about giving that presentation. I don't know if Cassandra's excited, but
I'm looking forward to it.
we'll see how it goes next week at the Planning and Finance Committees, because this will be proposed to be a joint discussion next week. Try to get the Planning Committee going a little bit early, right at the end of the Finance Committee, like we've done in the past, and present this to both groups.
Yes.
So the question is, this would be first presented to the Finance and the Planning Committee, and then it would be on the full board agenda?
Conceptually, yes.
Next week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rather than just waiting for the December board meeting?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we'll see how the Finance Committee goes. I mean, if it goes really long, then maybe things change, but that's the concept. The reason that I think it's important to kind of make this presentation to the full board is that this is going to, or embracing this idea of working with these new technologies like Uber and Lyft and integrating mobile apps and things like that is going to cost money, is going to need resources allocated within our budget, certainly in the future. And that's why I think it's important to have this discussion now. We may have some discussion, but right now I put it under, we're gonna have some discussions at the Planning Committee next week about the Central Avenue BRT. Just to recap, at the end of October, I would characterize what the St. Pete Beach Commission did was punt, and they deferred any action on the BRT to their city manager to have some discussions. I had a meeting with the city manager and mayor yesterday and presented them several options on reducing the cost to their city, like terminating the bus rapid transit at the top of their city at 75th and Gulf and not really going to their hotels, or going to their hotels and reducing the cost of the Central Avenue trolley just in their city to run less frequency and save them money, and the reception was very positive. I mean, they were positive about both those ideas. I showed them some bus stop level data that shows substantial ridership at the hotels and all the way down at the Hurricane restaurant that surprised them. I think the mayor, she said that she knows several people that ride the bus regularly, so she believed it. But they thought that was very helpful information to know that they actually have a lot of ridership all along the beach. Because as I think all of you saw at the workshop or then at the second meeting, the folks from the audience sort of gave them a different impression.
The current mayor is filling the vacancy of Mayor Lowe until March, and then they have elections where there's actually going to be an elected mayor.
Right.
And the current woman has indicated she's not going to run for that seat. So I guess in November we're going to be dealing with a new mayor.
In March.
In March, I'm sorry. March.
Yeah. So the timeline that I presented to them that, and that we're going to present to the PSTA board is, I'm going ahead and trying to meet with all of the St. Pete Beach commissioners and present these different options between now and Thanksgiving. It's my goal when I get there. We are developing the ridership data. We're looking at all these different options of different routings, different uses of the trolley, doing a whole ridership model of what the ridership might be to go to Treasure Island versus St. Pete Beach, to go to Madeira Beach, etc. And we'll probably have that sometime in December. We'll have all that worked out in December to present to the PSTA board. At least the timeline is present this to the PSTA board in January. So I told the mayor and the city manager that by the end of January, I basically said, yes, we might be able to go to 75th and Gulf, but if the ridership and the other factors favor Treasure Island for PSTA, we might say see ya to St. Pete Beach, and we might say let's focus on Treasure Island. I don't know that yet.
Have we had any meetings with Treasure Island so far to discuss?
I've had some meetings with them. I don't think there's much more of an appetite than there was in St. Pete Beach, but basically there's sort of two timelines. There's the PSTA board decision on where we think the data, based on data, a data-driven decision on which is the best route. Assuming that turns out to still be St. Pete Beach, I told them we would know that definitively by the end of January. And we would let them know that. Meanwhile, PSTA's and its consultants are still going to work to keep the project on schedule, mostly on the St. Petersburg end. And Heather Sobush, who's sort of leading that, will keep working with the consultant to stay on track between now and the deadline for us to complete design and ask and put our request into the federal government for the federal funds, which is August 1st of next year. So we're still on target, even though this decision in St. Pete Beach is a little bit up in the air. We're still on target. That's what I told the mayor and the city manager, that we would need a final decision by August 1st. But we're going to still move forward based on our own data and our own decision making and the PSD board's decision making that may or may not end up having the route go to their city. I put on the list of deadlines or time the March 14th, 2017 election in their city. the mayor and Melinda Pletcher are up for re-election or election.
Is it our intent to have the airporter that's going to go to St. Pete have a terminus where the riders could then move to the BRT to get to the beaches?
Yes,
That's in,
in downtown St. Petersburg.
and that has been, not the airporter specifically, but as we talk about the Trop redevelopment area,
Right.
with or without a stadium.
Yep.
We've talked about an intermodal nexus area that would be on the northeast side of the
Mhm.
Trop field.
Mhm.
So
Where the
yes,
U-Haul place is?
conceptually, we've discussed that, yeah.
Yeah, okay. The reason I'm asking that, because that could be an additional selling point if they were made aware of that. The fact that people could essentially get to the beach, either in Clearwater or in St. Pete Beach, Treasure Island, Madeira, wherever it is, by taking the airporter, hooking up with the BRT, and getting to the beach without having to rent a car or get an expensive cab ride or whatever.
Yeah.
So that might be an additional selling point if we could integrate those two concepts together.
That isn't a good idea to pitch that, because they both said to me, and I went back and I told Heather to check into this, and she kind of thought it was true. They both said to me that they felt like this was a great thing for their hotels, but it was actually a detriment to their own economic vitality, because it just took visitors away from them to go to St. Petersburg. That the only people that would ride this thing, in their view, are tourists staying in their hotels and workers. Workers from St. Petersburg and tourists, but they were just going to go to downtown St. Petersburg. Because their view is that if you want to go to the beach and you live in Omaha, Nebraska, you're going to go to the beach.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going, and this is not going to attract tourists from St. Pete that are staying in downtown St. Petersburg to the beach, which is not really true.
Yeah,
But
you gotta go
that's
both
their
ways.
view. Their view is this is just an exodus method out of their city, to not go to restaurants in their city, but go to St. Petersburg restaurants.
By the way, there's a fantastic theater in Omaha that Mary Louise and I found when we went to the
Okay.
Berkshire Hathaway meeting a couple of years ago. And so the people in Omaha, Nebraska, I'm sure are going to want to go to the Mahaffey. So that's the
Okay.
I wondered where you were going with that comment.
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
In Clearwater, the big issue is parking on the beach. So we want to get public transit going to the beach. Does St. Pete Beach have excessive parking?
No,
No.
they've got parking issues.
Yeah.
Not quite like Clearwater, but they do have parking issues.
It just kind of went, oh, have they thought about people from St. Pete going to their beach, but being deterred because of parking?
I mean, I've gone to events, I've driven from St. Pete to Hotel Zamora and turned around and went home because there was
Yeah,
no
no
parking
parking.
anywhere.
Yeah.
And the same thing, I forget the name of the new place, the barbecue restaurant on the beach, but you can't get parking. On a
Mhm.
Saturday night, you might as well take an Uber because it's impossible to find parking. And you spend so long driving around trying to find parking, and all you find are signs that, are tow signs.
Mhm.
So they've got big parking issues. It's a good point.
I think all of you. So,
Yeah. The issue there is they, at least from a city perspective, they view that as a responsibility exclusively of the hotels. And it's not really their problem as residents, it's the hotel's problem that they don't have parking. I did propose to them the concept that the capital
Sorry.
program to construct the stations in St. Pete Beach, that maybe we work together with them to get the hotels to put up that money to build the capital infrastructure, so that wouldn't be on the city. So they love that idea, of course, but remains to be seen whether we can get the hotels to do that. But I would say there's definitely some progress compared to where we were a month ago, at least with their openness, or at least they seem to be more open talking with them one-on-one than in their room with a bunch of folks that are not thrilled with the project, talking to them, but.
Just one more
Yes.
thing on there. The one thing that I had thought of before was, I haven't seen the data as to how we came up with the 700,000. That was the original proposed, and versus some of these options. When you come up with these other options, if you could include how that was calculated, it would be helpful for me to understand the other options.
Okay. That sounds great.
Do we have any idea at all what kind of number they would be willing to contribute? Or are they looking for us to provide the number and then they'll figure out if they can do it or not?
Well, that in part was part of the purpose behind asking them to write a letter, was so that we could have some framework to know where to start. Like, if they contributed nothing, do they want it? If they contributed a little, just to give us a sense of what we're working with, because if the response is, even if we contribute nothing, we don't want it at all,
Right.
then we can know how to redirect our efforts. And so I was looking for that little glimmer of hope,
Yeah, I remember
but
you
it
brought that up
was,
at the meeting, yeah.
but I think there was some misunderstanding, either there was some misunderstanding with comprehending the content of the letter. I think there was a paranoia that somehow this letter would become some
Contract.
binding agreement that we were going to run to the FTA with. So we just have to work through these things slowly, little step by little step.
Yeah. Taking it slowly with them, I think, will help. I mean, the mayor expressed deep concern, sort of philosophically, with the fork comment, and
Yeah.
they are. The more time that we can focus on the details of the project and less sort of stuff like that, I think will be good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would volunteer to help in the negotiation. It's not necessary. I'd be willing to go to some of those meetings and help
All right.
some of the funding issues.
Thank you, Commissioner Rockman. Okay.
I think that's pretty
Looks like
much
we've
it.
got about 10 more minutes. We don't have to keep talking, but any other questions?
Just
Yes.
on potential other business
Mhm.
for the board, one thing that came up at the TMA meeting was a presentation on the premium transit initiative. And during that presentation, Scott Pringle made it, and it sounded very much like the same presentation that he made back when we were starting off the Green Line journey.
Pringle? I'm sorry, who was the person?
Scott Pringle.
Pringle?
He is with Jacobs Engineering, who
Oh,
was the
yeah.
consultant that was
He's
selected.
the project manager of the consultants doing
Mhm.
that project. And it was at that time that I moved up to the table and said, this sounds like green light. How do we connect to either the grassroots or the people that are going to end up voting for this at the end? And and I talked with a representative from Tampa Bay Partnership and said basically the same thing afterwards. And they kind of said, well, we don't need to worry about that because the economy is going to be different. But it seems to me that in that premium transit study, it needs to be connected to what the people are going to be able to support. And so I just was thinking of possibly bringing that up under other business to talk about the grassroots or talk about how to get a wider base rather than the traditional transit advocates.
I think there was no way, because Scott was one of the key project leaders on the Greenlight, on the alternative analysis that led to Greenlight Pinellas. So just him standing up there in this same room, there was no hope for him to look different than many other meetings that have happened here. There was just the same discussions that we had during Greenlight from the TMA about getting the business members involved, getting grassroots groups involved. I mean, Scott agreed to all that, but I think your point is right on. Now that everybody in the Tampa Bay region has been down this path once before, how do you make it different? How do you get a different result? That wasn't really answered.
It kind of depends on what the premium transit study is
Reveals.
intended. Is it intended to just say, to deal with the CSX issue as a limited issue, or is it intended to really be the future direction for transit for the area? And one of the things that comes up is in the TBX, there's that area that's reserved for a premium transit line.
Mm-hmm.
And if that is going to be built, it really would make a whole lot of sense to build it during the construction of TBX,
Mm-hmm.
instead of getting TBX all built and then having to come in and shoehorn construction in there, which might mean closing lanes and so.
What is meant by the way they're using the term premium transportation?
Well, premium was, well, maybe Brad should say it. It was, as I understand it, it's, you can't say, look at using the CSX lines because that assumes a modal conclusion. Rather, so they said premium transit, because if you assume the modal, then Federal Transit can't participate in it.
Oh, okay.
That's what FDOT's position has been.
Yeah, that was FDOT's response to the TMA, when the TMA said, well, let's go ahead and do this CSX thing, especially the line from Tampa going up to Brooksville. And FDOT said, well, if you're expecting federal participation in
Because
that project.
you have to evaluate all alternatives as
Yes.
part of that NEPA project. Got it. Good explanation.
So theoretically, the premium transit could be that CSX line. It could be some other rail line. It could be a exclusive busway, express bus, which we did all that during the Greenlight or the alternative analysis process as well.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Okay, thank you for this great executive board meeting. And our next meeting, when's our next?
January
executive board
25th.
meeting?
Well, executive committee.
January 6th.
January 6th at 10 a.m. All right, we adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you this afternoon.
Well, I think what you commented on, I think it's a board leadership issue too. I think it kind of ties into,
We'll be back on.
no, I didn't want